can, yeah. Hello everyone, my name is Matapalo Musikiri. I'm the social media coordinator at SEFC. I'd like to officially welcome you to this significant event hosted by SEFC and Earth Life Africa. We're honored today to have Vladimir with us, and I'll be telling you more about him. So the objective of this event is for us to learn about the dangers of nuclear and go back to our communities, be advocates. At this point, I'll be welcoming to stage Bram, who is the chair of SEFC, the former moderator for Church Dutch Church Reformed Church, and currently the director for Center of Public Witness. Thank you. Over to you. I'll give you this tiny mic. You can just hold on to that.
Thank you so much. I'm going to be very short, just from my side. First, a hearty word of welcome, all protocol observed, to each and every one of you. Thank you for joining us for this incredible, important conversation. And just thank you for coming out and be with us tonight. This is the first thing. Second thing, SEFC is, I just want to say one thing about SEFC. SEFC is a faith-based organization. But I've learned one thing in SEFC. I'm a devoted Christian, by the way. But I've learned to work with other faiths. And I met incredible people, and also people of non-faith. When you join hands on a common cause, it is possible to unite and experience a wonderful family of harmony. And maybe this is one of the biggest gifts that I've received from SEFC. So it's so good to have all of you here tonight. So when I say this, then I really say it from the bottom of my heart. Just welcome in this family. Also the partners, Earth Life Africa, wonderful partners, happy to be with you. And then the final thing I just want to say, and then I'm done. One of the things that we on the board constantly remind ourselves is that in the day and age, and especially when you live in Africa, there is a very sensitive link between poverty and ecology. And I'm not going to go into the detail. And we must be aware of that. Now, you are clever people. I'm not going to spell it out to you. When we deal with something as complex as nuclear, then there are so many things that comes into play. So I almost want to put a disclaimer on the conversation to say we are dead serious about this incredible planet that we received as a gift. We love it. I'm alive when I'm in nature. And we take hands to look with all our intellectual capacity from a faith lens at SEFC at our planet, and say we want to protect this planet as a gift for our children and grandchildren. This is all that I want to say, and with this I want to say thank you to all of us. We're really looking forward to the conversation tonight, and thank you for coming and joining us. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Bram. And now for the housekeeping rules. We all love rules, but please switch off your phones. And we have an online audience. We have people that are joining us from Joburg. I don't know if we're able to see them on the screen, just to say hi to all of them. Are you guys able to switch on your cameras? No? Yes? We just want to say hi from Cape Town. Maybe not, yes? Germany. And we have people from Germany as well. And, yeah, Durban. PE as well. And Joburg. So for anyone that's joining us online, please keep yourself on mute. If you have any questions, just drop them onto the comment box. We have people here that will be sending through questions. Going on, we have bathrooms this side. You just go back down on where you register and then use the way out. And just to let you guys know that I'll be facilitating today alongside Maya, who is the campaigns coordinator extraordinaire in SEFC. Moving forward, I am going to be introducing you to our speakers. Can you please give me time? I'm going to go through the bios, but I'll be quite short. As you all know, that Vladimir is joining us from Russia. He is a Russian environmentalist who is co-founding and leading the environmental organization called Eco Defense. And Vlad was one of the recipients of the 2021 Right Livelihood Award for spearheading grassroots campaigns against environmentally damaging practices for decades. And we also have Makoma Lekalakala, who is the director of Earthlife Africa. She is an environmental justice anti-nuclear organization, which is Earthlife Africa. Makoma is a strong campaigner for a just and fair society. And we have Francesca de Gaspres, who is the executive director of SEFC. Who worked, sorry, let me go through it again. SEFC based in Cape Town, it's us. And Francesca has worked regionally with faith leaders in their communities, taking ethical action for eco and climate justice in Africa. And we have here Peter Becker, who is a resident in Cape Town, who has been involved in the debate around nuclear power in South Africa since 2020. Thank you. So I'm going to be giving over to Maya, and I think Maya will take us through the panel. Thank you.
Cool. Hi, everybody. Is it fine if I sit? Yeah. Cool. Okay. Thank you, Matapelo, for the opening. Thank you, Bram. And good evening, everybody. And I'm looking forward to an exciting discussion this evening. So just to contextualize us a little bit, in the context of South Africa at the moment, with Cyril Ramaphosa also having just signed the climate change bill into law, and in the context of a country that currently has an energy availability factor of about 54%, also being one of the top producers of greenhouse gases per capita in the world, energy is an important topic of discussion. And it's also evident that we need a just transition to a renewable energy future. Nuclear energy is a false solution to a just energy transition. Nuclear power is a costly endeavor that also produces highly toxic waste that remains radioactive for thousands of years. It's also in South Africa often shrouded with secrecy. It's associated with a lack of transparency and also limited public participation in related decision-making processes. Our nuclear power program has existed since the 1970s, and the Koeberg nuclear power station, which I'm sure we all know about, is the only nuclear power station in Africa. It was commissioned in 1984 with a 40-year lifespan. And Koeberg was recently, I think last week, granted a license extension to operate for a further 20 years by the National Nuclear Regulator, whereas they would have had to have started decommissioning now. And this extension was granted despite concerns raised by the public, by NGOs and by researchers on various issues, including the public participation processes, concerns around the safety of Koeberg, concerns around the emergency plans that are in place, cracks in the cement housing of the reactors, the legacy of the nuclear waste that's produced, various important documents being out of date, and so many other concerns that were raised, Coburg was still granted this extension. And then also when we talk about new nuclear in South Africa, in 2015, a R1 trillion nuclear deal between Russia and South Africa for 9.6 gigawatts of nuclear was challenged by SAFC and Earthlife Africa. And this was a successful case, and the deal was declared unconstitutional. We currently find ourselves in a similar situation where the Minister of Electricity has gazetted a determination to commence the process of the procurement of 2,500 megawatts of new nuclear, which would also likely cost upwards of 330 billion rands. And South Africa's nuclear aspirations also go beyond this, where in the Integrated Resource Plan of 2023, it envisions up to 14,500 megawatts worth of nuclear power. And it's just important to highlight that a financial decision like that could define a generation. It's just clear that nuclear power doesn't make practical or economic sense for South Africa, and neither does it for the region, or if nuclear was to expand beyond South Africa. And so what these three organizations that are represented, on this side of me, have been doing in the last few weeks is a solidarity campaign. They were in Kenya visiting some community activists there who are also challenging proposed nuclear in Kenya. They visited the sites. They were also in Johannesburg and engaged with a group of women who were representing 12 different countries in Africa, and also shared information on nuclear with them. They were also in the Eastern Cape and engaging with community activists also around Tastepunt, another proposed nuclear site. And today we were also in the Mitchell's Plain community, engaging with them and sharing information. And now we are here at yet another event. I'd like to start off with our keynote speaker, Vladimir. Could you give us some information on the geopolitics of nuclear power and broaden the scope a little bit to start us off? Thank you.
You stand. Thank you very much for coming. It's a pleasure to speak in the Desmond Tutu Foundation, and a big honor for me. I'm going to touch geopolitics, but I'm not going to start with it. I'm going to start with, something about history. About 50 or 60 years ago, many countries around the world been so much optimistic about developing nuclear power. They invested very big money in it. Some countries built huge nuclear corporations that's been building hundreds of reactors. And back in 1970s, one of American presidents said that by the year 2000, there will be thousands of nuclear reactors in the United States, and nuclear energy will be too cheap to matter. I never tried that way. Okay. So what do we have today in the United States is less than 100 reactors, and we'll build. All right.
Just keep talking.
Yeah.
You're gonna help?
I'll do this.
That's fine. That's
Yeah. So today it's less than 100 reactors in the United States, and the number is decreasing. And there is no replacement built, and old reactors going for decommissioning. And nuclear energy, according to investment banks' analytics, is the most expensive source of energy in the United States. I'm sure many of you heard that Germany phased out nuclear last year. Earlier, it was the case with Italy. They also phased out nuclear. There is a number of countries in Europe who did not phase out it yet, but having like decisions that they will wait until the operation license will be over for old reactors, and then will shut down. All they have, those countries like Switzerland and Spain and a bunch of others. So we are basically at this moment of a history when Western world, or the big majority of countries in the Western world, finally realized nuclear is too complicated, too dangerous. It's just not the way to go. And more countries, so-called developed countries, are adopting policies of developing renewable energy and reaching 100% of renewable energy goal in the future. Just like, for example, Germany, today having about half of energy coming from renewable energy sources, and by 2040 it's going to be 80%, by 2050 they plan on to be 100%. So in this situation, when there are not that many orders anymore for new reactors in developed countries, those big nuclear corporations starting to look for new markets. And obviously this is Africa, and that's why we see through the last few years especially, we see in many African countries, people from nuclear power companies, well, either from Russia or from the West, appearing and proposing to build, well, not to build yet, but to sign an agreements about building nuclear reactors in the future. And from my point of view, it's actually a really historic moment for Africa. And that's a moment when one way or another it will be decided whether African countries will go the same way like developed countries in the West did. They're going to experiment with nuclear power, learn all those bad things that associated with nuclear, like the waste that will be dangerous for many thousands of years, like nuclear accidents, like very bad economic side of it. Well, basically, I would say nuclear power is economic disaster. And then probably just like the developed countries will decide that it's better to go for renewable energy. Or I think it's possible that African countries would decide not to repeat these mistakes from developed world and go straight to renewable energy, which I think is the way to go. And that's why I find this time very interesting to live in, and I'm trying to take my part in this development, and I'm going to different African countries and telling people all those facts about nuclear that I know, that we experienced in Russia. And I'm sure some of you heard, or all of you heard probably, about small nuclear reactors. I see here in South Africa, it's already some kind of discussion. It's in newspapers, and there is like nuclear experts like Kelvin Kem and others speaking about it. And I wanted also to touch on small reactors, just because nuclear industry is trying to sell us old technology that existed even 50 years ago, basically, at least on paper. And it was never implemented. I mean, I'm talking about small reactors. It was never implemented for a very simple reason: it's bloody expensive. And but now, it's also a consequence that the developed countries learned all those bad sides of nuclear power, and they don't want to go on with it anymore. And now nuclear industry is trying to, come to new markets, but also in the developed countries, they're saying like, oh, we've got this new magic technology. It's small reactors. It's way better than big reactors. It will solve all our problems. It's a magic bullet, good for, very cheap energy, good for climate, wonderful, beautiful technology. Buy it from us. That's what they do. And I'm gonna briefly tell you with the slides. Do we have a slide? Oh. I'm gonna just briefly tell you what the real situation about the small reactors. First of all, I mean, of course, people care about money, right? Because we like to spend money for good things that like to spend for bad things. So it's not that many of the small reactors around the world. But we know that one exists in China, a couple exist in Russia, there is one under construction in Argentina, and it's interesting to see how much does it cost, what was the estimated cost, and what was the actual cost. So we can see that in China, the small reactor estimated cost was 3 times lower than the actual cost. And when it comes to Russia, we have 2 small reactors. We call them floating nuclear power plant. It's 2 small reactors and a barge. So in Russia, actual costs were 4 times more than estimated. And in Argentina, it's already 7 times more expensive than estimated cost, and the construction is not over. On the other side in graphics, those are 3 different projects of small reactors that based, I believe, in the United States. And here we can see, I mean, none of it is built yet. So we don't know actual cost of it, but this is the estimated cost and how it's growing. It's still on paper. It's not even built. But the estimated cost is growing like every year, those companies announcing. And it's like NuScale is the most famous, startup with small nuclear reactors. They started with $10 per kilowatt. That's what they promised in 2015. And now, last year, it was already $22. So it went more than twice. And can we get the next slide? Next one? Oh, okay. And time, of course, very important. I mean, especially South Africa, load shedding story, everything. When countries investing, they need to know, obviously, when they're going to get their energy. It's important for planning, for businesses, for regular people who need energy. So the time is important, right? So here we can see that in China, small reactors, they were planning to build small reactor for 4 years, and they spent 12. In Russia, they were planning to build this small nuclear power plant, the floating one, for 3 years, and they spent 13. And in Argentina, the one that is not completed yet, the plan was 4 years, and they spent 13 years, and it's not finished yet. And but it's not only the case with the small reactors. On the other side, I mean, those things are small reactors I was talking here about, but other things are big reactors. So you can see that it's more or less comparable situation. I mean, some of the big reactors been built for 9-10 years, some of it been built for 16 years, and the champion is Finland. You can see that basically when it comes to nuclear power, at least, well, there is 3 rules. One is it always takes much more time than they promise. Second rule, it always costs much more than they promise. And the third one, there is a lot of dangerous things anyway. And first of all, it's of course nuclear waste. Small reactors producing the same nuclear waste as big reactors. When you calculate, depending on how much energy produced, it's not less of a nuclear waste produced by small reactors. It's approximately the same. So speaking about this new magic thing like small reactors that the industry is proposing in many countries now, and there is a lot of talk, especially in developed countries, about it, we can say that it's all same story. It's too slow, it's too dangerous, it's too expensive, just like with big reactors. And can I have my third slide? Yeah, it's just to illustrate Remember, I told you in the beginning about what American president was saying back in 1970s, that nuclear energy will be too cheap to matter. This is what's happening in the United States right now. These are prices for energy, and this yellow and orange thing, it's estimated prices for the energy coming out of future, not built yet, small reactors. And those things are wind and solar energy, and it already exists, and we already know the actual cost of it. So here we have a little bit more expensive, the PV and storage a little bit more expensive than PV without storage, and there is also wind power, offshore wind a little bit more expensive, the land-based wind, really not expensive. So that's a reality right now. We can say that, as I already mentioned, the Western countries, developed world, already learned about all those bad things, but so now they are companies coming here and trying to sell all these bad technologies, just thinking that people here in African countries don't know about all of it, and they will be happy to have this, prestigious, very important technology, which is of course linked to nuclear weapon, of course, as we know. And geopolitical thing that was mentioned earlier here, among the most aggressive, or probably the most aggressive vendor that is promoting its projects in Africa right now, it's Russian Rosatom. That's a state company. Well, it's actually not the company. It's sort of a part of a Russian government that just called State Nuclear Corporation. But I'm saying this because historically in the Soviet Union, also Russian Federation, in the post-Soviet times, we had Ministry of Atomic Power, but then for some reason it was decided it will be called not the ministry anymore, but the state corporation. But they staying in the same building, they having the same properties they had before, but now they called not the part of a government, but state corporation. That's okay. But they are actually part of Russian government. So the geopolitical game that's going on right now, in Africa becoming like the big hotspot for this geopolitical game, is that Vladimir Putin proposing to as many countries as he can to build new nuclear power plants, and also proposing to extract loans from Russian state budget to those countries who will be willing to adopt nuclear technology, Russian nuclear reactors, on their territory. And why we don't think it's kind of a business they do, just because when they extract their loans from a Russian state budget, we can see that the interest rate is so low, it's even lower than inflation rate, and it's obviously not the scheme to make money. It's the scheme to organize the so-called, some kind of economic and also political dependence of certain countries on Russia. And by dependence, I mean, first of all, that today, signing a contract with some kind of nuclear vendor means that you're going to be dependent on certain company or a country it's coming from for, well above 1 century. And it's going to take 15, 20 years from the moment you start to plan nuclear build and until the moment you connect your nuclear reactors to the grid. Then it's going to be at least 60 years when reactor will be in operation. If extended, it will be not 60, but likely more 80 or 90. And then there will be at least a couple of decades for decommissioning. And during this time, you will be dependent on the engineers from this country, on the nuclear fuel that's coming from this country. And the nuclear fuel is the whole, very interesting thing, because you cannot compare it to anything else, to coal or gas or oil or anything. If, let's say, you had a supplier who was feeding you with a fuel, And for some reason, this supplier said, no, I'm not going to supply you with fuel anymore. So you just go on the world market and you buy this fuel there. But it doesn't work like that with nuclear fuel, because you are not putting uranium itself in the reactor. You're putting a fuel rod that has uranium inside. But still, you have to know, you've got to have a technology how to build this fuel rod, which would be very different for different types of reactors. And usually only company that sells you reactor knows how to build the fuel rod for it. So you cannot really go on the world market, buy there some uranium or mine your own uranium and that's it. No, it's not exactly the fuel you need. You need to know how to build the fuel rods. So it's kind of a scheme, you can say, of basically organizing dependence, and a pretty big dependence on a certain country where you buy nuclear technology from. For a country like South Africa, it means a big debt, because it's a huge sum of money. I mean, for a big nuclear reactor, it would be around, 10 billion of American dollars, I think, more or less today, for a big reactor. But the last nuclear reactors that were connected to grid in the United States, it was, if I'm not mistaken, 17 billion of American dollars per reactor with 1,000 megawatt capacity. So it's extremely expensive thing, and of course, like getting a loan or credit from somewhere for that amount of money will put you in a debt, and of course, being dependent on a fuel supply and engineers and technology in general from another country, sooner or later will put you in political dependence as well. So that was the geopolitical aspect that you mentioned. I was talking quite long, I know. I would stop here and invite your questions after all of you speak. Thank you very much.
Mic check.
Yeah, this should be
on.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Vladimir, for that, very informative and a lot of information in a short amount of time, but also so important to understand how South Africa fits in with the global context, and also how we can see the costs and the timelines of these nuclear builds, and how that isn't necessarily able to assist South Africa in our current energy needs. I'm going to hand over to the rest of my panel now. So first I'm going to go to Makoma from Earthlife Africa. Makoma, having been involved in nuclear for many years, could you perhaps bring us back to the South African context and talk a bit about the history of nuclear, and maybe also bring in the experiences of affected communities as well?
Good evening, and thank you very much. I would like to thank SAFSEI and EcoDefense for co-hosting the event. And when you talk about the history of nuclear and fighting against nuclear in the country, I would really want to give thanks to the forebearers, people who were part of the struggle before us, and those that are currently involved in the struggle. When Earthlife Africa, which is an activist environmental justice organization, was formed, it was when Kubek nuclear power plant was commissioned around 1988. So it was a response to that. And throughout, we had some of the people who really infused or made us aware of the dangers of nuclear energy. And I would like to give thanks to at least those that I'm aware and have been interacting with. I would like to give thanks to David Fick, who's on the line now, who has done a lot of education. I actually learned a lot from him around nuclear economics, nuclear technology, together with other activists. Also give thanks to Richard Worthington, who last week we were with, who is one of the people who were fighting so hard and part of challenging what was called the pebble bed modular reactor, which today we know as the small modular reactors. And Tristan Taylor, who actually was the brain behind us having to challenge the 9,600 megawatts of the proposed nuclear new build. And the struggle around Thayspent is still continuing, with more people connecting the dots and becoming part, and also advocating for an alternative like renewable energy technologies. Also Judith Taylor, who has passed on and who was also at the center of ensuring that Earthlife doesn't abandon the struggle against nuclear energy. And finally, my friend here, Liz McDade, who we continuously, I think, the two gogos, you know, the two mamas and whatever we've been labeled, still fighting on and challenging this unjust, you know, energy, ensuring that there's energy democracy in the country. Today we had a momentous occasion where the President of South Africa signed the climate change bill into act. And this is momentous in a sense that with this long-awaited act, at least it brings us to hold municipalities, actually all spheres of government, accountable to a climate change response that is aligned to the nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement. And with the act, we will have the powers, I think, to ensure that there's alignment, that also whatever energy choice we have doesn't have excessive greenhouse gas emissions. We are told that nuclear, it's carbon free or less carbon intensive, but we know it's more carbon intensive based on the uranium mining that takes place, or the nuclear fuel chain that leads to that is part of generating electricity. The process thereof is very carbon intensive. But this also, climate change has set a scene for much needed government effort necessary for an adequate response to climate change. The history, there has been a whole lot of movements and organizations around campaigning against nuclear energy. And I think these are some of what we need to review and reflect and actually see if those strategies that we had in the past could be used against the Kuwait lifetime extend operation. We had campaign against nuclear energy. We have Nuclear Energy Across the Earth campaign. We have Kuwait Alert Alliance, and there has been other movements that have come together to challenge. And I think that is what is important for us to be able to reflect and continue with those strategies and tactics. But my ending would be that nuclear is not a solution to climate change. It's carbon intensive, and all of us should endeavor to be part of a movement that ensures that South Africa and Africa, actually the whole world, becomes a nuclear-free society. Thank you.
Thank you, Makoma. That was great. And yeah, I think so important to highlight that nuclear is a false solution that's often touted as a solution to climate change. Francesca, yeah, as the executive director of SAFSI, yeah, we're just with the current context of the extension of Coburg and with all of these new nuclear plans being pushed forward, could you maybe give us a bit of an overview of some of civil society and SAFC and NGOs' responses to what's happening?
Thanks, Maya. I'm going to stand up so you can see me at the back, even though it's a little bit more intimidating. But good evening, everyone. I feel really privileged to stand here in front of all of you, and thank you all for being here this evening. It's a very important moment for all of us, and I want to first of all thank the SAFC board members that are here, and especially our founders, Kate and Jeff Davies, who are here. They came a long way, and we really appreciate you being here with us. They were part of the people at SAFC who really took this issue up and took it seriously. In fact, Liz used to tell stories about how Jeff at one point even thought nuclear was a good idea. So if there's anyone in this room who still thinks it might be a good idea, by the end of tonight, I hope you have had your minds changed, because Bishop Jeff definitely has, and he's one of our strongest advocates. And I want to just say that there are many others in this room who have a lot of knowledge and expertise and have been part of this campaign and fight against nuclear for a very long time. And I just want to appreciate all of you and know that, as Bram was saying at the beginning, we really do work on this as a collective. It's a very big topic, and I feel really privileged to have Vlad and Makoma, who are both part of Don't Nuke the Climate, here with us today. This idea was hatched at the last climate change conference. So there you also know that the climate change conferences, good things do come out of them, because that's where this event was started. And it's down to Makoma that we were able to visit Kenya and to see what the communities are doing there. So I feel really inspired by quite a difficult political environment, a lot of difficulty that the communities are facing, but they are very strong and determined to stop nuclear. And I feel that that's really the message that I want to bring to all of you, that we must stop nuclear in South Africa. There's a lot of misinformation out there. So when you're in Kenya, you hear that, oh, it's all happening in South Africa, or now Ghana has agreed to go nuclear. But we know, and we really need to challenge that misinformation, it is contested, that it's vested interests who are pushing this onto us, and we really have to take a stand and speak loudly and clearly about it, and not feel that we don't have enough knowledge to do so. I mean, we were talking about it earlier in Mitchell's Plain, and some of those community leaders are here this evening. It's wonderful to have you all here, and to think about really what we don't want. And it's really that simple. We don't want unaffordable, unsafe, and unnecessary nuclear energy. And that goes from the new plans, which came out in the IRP 2019 for new nuclear in South Africa. And that is currently the government is trying to procure another 2,500 megawatts, which is a little bit bigger than the Coburg nuclear power station. And unfortunately, they're pushing that procurement through very quickly. Even now, with the Government of National Unity, the new electricity and energy minister is pushing hard for that procurement to happen. However, SAFC and EarthLife Africa have taken the government to court over that decision, because it is, in our view, unlawful and unconstitutional. And there's a number of reasons why we've done that, and they're not dissimilar to the last time. So, the zombie rises again, and once again we say insufficient public participation, processes aren't being followed, and it's very important that we all say we do not need new nuclear energy. And there's lots of reasons for that. Some of them Vlad has pointed out, but there's others as well. One of them being, and this is something that Liz has taken up with the Green Connection, is the integrated energy plan. When you do planning by sector, which is what we've been doing for many years in South Africa, you look at gas and you say, oh, let's do gas along the coast. And then you have to, with organizations like the Green Connection, Sustaining the Wild Coast, and many others, stand up and say, we don't want gas along our coastlines for many, many reasons. Again, the reason why that keeps happening is because we don't do an integrated energy plan. This is part of our legislation. The Green Connection took the government to court last year. We joined them to support the initiative to say we want an integrated energy plan that looks at issues like poverty, as our chair mentioned, issues like what's the most affordable energy system. You know, I don't have to be just rabidly anti-nuclear, although I have to say, yes, I am rabidly anti-nuclear. I want to say that the facts speak for themselves. The facts speak for themselves. Vlad has pointed out to us, we can see that renewable energy is the future. Why? Because it's affordable, it's quick to install, and you can put it on your roof and actually make some money out of it, which is fantastic. As Bishop Jeff always used to say to us, God has given us sun and wind, and why aren't we using it? You know, I mean, if Germany has got 50% renewable energy, what is South Africa busy doing? I really do have to ask myself. And it's this integrated energy plan, the IEP, is what we need, because then there won't be an argument. But in the meanwhile, while we wait for that to actually happen, we are having to, Earth Life Africa and SAFSI are having to take the government to court again to say, no, we do not want this. You haven't followed due process. And so hopefully we'll be seeing them in the courts later this year. You may have heard in the news that the DA actually filed just before we did, about a month before. Am I running out of time? Yes, okay, quickly. We are not in cahoots with the DA. We want to stand separate. It's very important as civil society. Also, I don't think they're actually anti-nuclear, so that's another topic. But please talk to all of your recently elected officials, because we do not want nuclear, and it's very important. I have to get to this point. The other issue we've been following incredibly closely is the Koeberg nuclear power station, which has just been given its life extension, as Maya was telling us. We have made numerous submissions to say this is unsafe. There is a culture of secrecy around nuclear, which dates back to weaponry and apartheid, and what it means is that it puts us in an unsafe position. The analysis is that the defense in depth at the Koeberg nuclear power station is weak and insufficient, and it puts all of us at risk, and we do not need an unsafe, ancient power station generating a small amount and mostly offline for various reasons in Cape Town. The population, I was just speaking to Michael just before, and the population around the power station has increased so much that there's absolutely no way that people can evacuate safely from that power plant if something goes wrong. It's extremely concerning, and it's an urgent issue that we must address. There are critical and urgent safety aspects of that power station that have not been addressed, and we're very, very fortunate to have a former director of the National Nuclear Regulator, Peter Becker, with us, who I'm sure will be covering this in a lot more detail. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francesca. I'm going to ask Peter Becker to come up next as a longtime spokesperson of the Koeberg Alert Alliance and a previous member of the NNR board. Peter was the community rep on the National Nuclear Regulator board. Briefly. Long story. another court case as well. Nuclear and us equals court. Anyways, Peter, if you could maybe expand a bit on what Francesca was starting with, maybe also go a bit into the governance, but tell us a bit more about Koeberg and everything that's going on there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'll also stand so people can see me from the back. So I think everyone else covered the thanks a lot, so I'm not going to repeat that. But I think I'd rather blame some people for being involved in nuclear. In the intro, it was, I think you said from 2020. That's actually 2010. I assume that I look so young, you can't believe it's been that long. But I was sucked, without pointing fingers at anyone in specific, I was sucked into this whole thing about 15 years ago. And so to talk about Coburg in the very limited time that we have, why was Coburg built? South Africa had abundant supplies of coal. There was no mention of climate change back then. Emissions weren't a thing. Why did they build a nuclear plant? Well, it did allow them to import nuclear technology, such as uranium processing. They built the Pelindaba site where they could do fuel fabrication, and that also allowed them to make highly enriched uranium and also extract plutonium. And we know that South Africa had a nuclear bomb program. There's a link between nuclear weapons always, and that enabled the apartheid government to make 4 nuclear bombs back in the day. Lots of contention over whether they tested one over the Indian Ocean or not, who knows. So the environment in which Coburg was developed was an environment of secrecy and military applications. And that culture of secrecy exists till this day, that it's not for the public to know about. We don't want pesky community reps on the NNR board. We want to do stuff between the Eskom and NNR, and will the public just keep their noses out of it, please? So when it came to Coburg, which was sort of designed in the 60s and built in the 70s and commissioned in 1984 and 1985, respectively, the 2 reactors, that was designed to last for 40 years. And that 40 years came to an end about a week ago, in fact, on the 21st of July. Or it's about now, isn't it now? Today is a portentous day. So there was lots of discussion around this, and I think Francesca touched on that. What are the problems? And there's been a lot of questions over the independence of the National Nuclear Regulator, because that is a body that is meant to be completely independent from any government institution that promotes or uses nuclear power. And that's according to the Convention on Nuclear Safety, which was a treaty signed in I think 1994 or 1996, and we've failed to implement that. Our parliament has failed to implement it, and the president has failed to implement it. So to this day, the nuclear regulator falls under the Minister for Energy, and that used to be Minister Mantashe, and him and I have had some exchanges, many affidavits, and as it was mentioned, I was appointed to fulfill the role of community rep on the NNR board, and that's required by law. And we noticed some time back that there was no such rep, and at that point I was appointed, I was nominated, and then I was actually appointed, to everyone's surprise, to that position on the board. Within 6 months, immediately there was a complaint from Eskom, and that escalated into a legal opinion about my misconduct, which started as conflict of interest, then turned into misconduct, and I was dismissed. So long story short, went through the High Court, the appeal, and the Supreme Court of Appeal, and they confirmed that I was dismissed in bad faith with an ulterior motive, and there was no misconduct, and the process was done with undue haste, vitiated by unfairness, which is a word I had to look up. So now we have a situation where we are on the verge of Coburg trying to get its renewal. And I would like to correct something. Coburg has not been granted a 20-year extension. And there's quite a pattern of this in government bodies. There's this conditional agreement. Because if they say no, they're in deep trouble. If they say yes, they're going to be taken to court. So they say neither yes nor no. It reminds me of that Scarborough Fair song. So in the case of the determination, they said yes, but just demonstrate the rationality of it, please. So we agree with you completely, but we don't see it as rational, which was an interesting combo of yes and no. In this case, they've said they've granted the extension subject to 29 conditions. What are those conditions? We don't know, because that's not the business of the public. And when the NNR is ready and have gone through internal processes, they will release those 29 conditions to the public. So what are they? And why is it possible to tell Eskom, yes, you can go ahead? That process has been done, but they haven't finalized the license yet. It seems highly suspicious, and I do wish I was on the board and able to represent communities. Unfortunately, this is the only opportunity that I get, is to talk out in the media. So the question is, to what degree were the submissions really considered? To what degree have all the faults found by the IAEA, who, 1 minute left, who came out and found 14 problems with the safety of Coburg? We don't know. And to what, is it a coincidence that 1 week before the license expired after 40 years, the NNR came out and announced, yes, you can go ahead, but we're not ready yet to tell anyone else what those conditions or to show you the license. So it's not a done deal. We're now in a situation where everyone has 60 days to appeal to the minister. Which minister is unclear, so do it to both of them, against the decision of the NNR. And if that is refused, there's the option of a court action. And I hope that that is an option that's going to be thoroughly explored because of the various reasons we've touched on, the lack of spatial development, the inability to develop low-cost housing, routes to Cape Town, the unknown cost of the waste disposal, the unknown location of the waste disposal, and the very final point, that Eskom is lying about how much it's costing. And you see in the headlines again and again, it's 20 billion rand. It was 20 billion rand in 2010. And everyone knows what you paid for a loaf of bread in 2010, you don't pay now. But Eskom is sticking to its guns with very disingenuous language by saying things like the budgeted amount is 20 billion, or it's gone up to 21 billion now, something like that. And we know inflation would take it to 70 billion, but Eskom always goes 3 times over. So it's actually maybe 200 billion. We don't know. And who's going to pay for that? Well, electricity consumers. I think Eskom just put in a request for a 44% increase in hikes, and they're refusing to say how much is being spent on Kubik. It's none of your business, and it will tell you when it's all done and over. So that is something I know that SAFC's tried to get a business case out of Eskom, and they released it with a snigger with all the figures removed, and said, there's the business case that justifies it. So I'm sure there'll be time for answers, but I think I'll probably reach my time. So thank you very much, Maya, and thanks for arranging this to SAFC, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. And I think what you covered also really highlights what I mentioned earlier about nuclear being shrouded in secrecy and this extreme lack of transparency. And I think you don't even have to be remotely anti-nuclear to be anti-nuclear in the context of Kubik and South Africa. I'm going to ask Makoma to come in again. I believe there's some more points that you want to cover.
Thank you very much. I didn't time myself when I made introductory remarks, and what I wanted to bring as the current developments now around nuclear energy. We have heard a lot about the just transition, and South Africa has actually, the cabinet of the country of the previous dispensation had actually adopted a just transition framework as recommended by the Presidential Climate Commission. And one of the issues that come up whenever the nuclear debate comes is that it's carbon neutral, and this is a solution for climate change. And we know that the negative impact of climate change, I think people around here are much more familiar with the flooding that takes place, the fires. Those are climate change-induced natural disasters. But we believe that nuclear energy cannot resolve this. One is that it's carbon intensive. I think Peter has given a history around that. So we need to challenge that nuclear energy is a solution to climate change based on the fact that it's carbon intensive. And if we're talking a just transition, we need not repeat what was done in the past that we know it's harmful. So restorative justice is at the center of the just transition, not only in South Africa, but globally. So if we really need to move towards a low carbon economic development, we should also look at the cost of nuclear. Section 34 of the Electricity Regulation Act talks about how any form of electricity generation needs to be a low cost option, and nuclear, it's not low cost energy option. We have heard from Vladimir Slivyak when he was explaining the difference, which is no difference, around the small reactors and the big reactors, because the big reactors will be all over the place, so the bill still comes up. And what we hear today is that the small reactors that are marketed to us as the solution to load shedding, each reactor, which is 300 megawatts, would cost about 250 billion. So imagine if the reactors, they are going to build 10 or 20 reactors, how much is that going to be? Still the same price, but the externalized costs around that are going to be borne by South Africans like those living around Falpoorts who are not knowing what to do with the waste, and the waste has so much negative impacts on their health, on the fauna and flora around where they are, and also that impacts the future generations because there's food insecurity caused by where waste is dumped. The beauty of the country, it's gone, ecotourism, it's gone, and the water gets polluted, whether it's the water at top level or underground water, because of the waste residues that we find ourselves in. But one thing, I think my message would be that never ever be fooled that nuclear is a solution to climate change. It's carbon intensive, it's expensive, it's dangerous, and there's no democracy, energy democracy, that our constitution enshrines. So we need to say, I think, tell it, say it, whether is it a good option or not an option for us, whilst we have abundant renewable energy sources around us that could be utilized so that we move to a low carbon economic development. Thank you.
Thank you, Makoma, and thank you to all the panelists for so much insight and information. I'm going to open up the floor to some questions and comments. Please keep your inputs short and sweet. We have a lot of people here. I see your hand, don't you worry. And I'm going to take maybe 4 or 5 questions at a time and then ask the panelists to respond. My colleagues will bring around microphones, so please speak into the microphone also for the people who are joining online, and please also introduce yourself and stand up when you ask your question. Okay.
We'll also tell people online to drop their questions and taking it from below.
Okay. Yeah, so for those who are online, you can put your questions in the comment box and we will raise those as well. Cool. Okay, I saw there's the first hand, and then this one, and then there's one at the back there.
Good evening, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Lydia Peterson, and I hail from Mitchell's Plain on the Cape Flats. And I'm here today as a concerned citizen. My question is to Mr. Becker. I actually made up this question before you mentioned it, about the 44% increase that Eskom is planning to get or ask for. For the benefit of the audience, could you please give us some insight? Is that really necessary when Koeberg is not operating at its nominal capacity? So a 44% increase, how does that relate to Koeberg not being effective, like Eskom is saying, and it is reliable for the last 40 years, and also cost effective? How would you answer that to the communities that is already cash strapped? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take this question at the front. Yes, I'll just...
Okay, following orders. Liz McDade, Strategic Lead at the Green Connection. Just a couple of comments. Thank you, panel. So when the Russians built or proposed to build the last nuclear deal that had to go to court, they said they would build it, but the fine print of the contract said South Africa would take the risks. So they would build the house. If it fell down, it's our problem. So I wanted to know if you knew if that was the norm. The cost, you put up the cost, again, the last deal was going to take the entire budget of South Africa, and we could lots more better things to spend our money on. Foul pits. So when foul pits in Koeberg were constructed 40 years ago, apartheid system meant that people never had an opportunity to even raise their voice or say no. But now, this is my question to you guys. How will you account to future generations? Because now we do know, the panel's told us, so what are we going to do about it? And then what I wanted to tell everybody was that tomorrow there is a meeting in Parliament of the committees that deal with this nuclear issue. So if you've got spare time, go to Parliament. The meeting is open to the public, and go and tell those MPs over tea, over lunch, go and tell them what you feel and what you think they should be doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. And thanks for the call to action as well. There's a question at the back.
Good evening to everyone, and thank you for the event. I'm Kululekile Banzi. I'm coming from a company called Development Africa Strategy. For starters, I think I can confidently say that I speak for most of Africa when I say we don't really care about the concerns of the West because they've proven themselves to be hypocrites. When it comes to nuclear energy, people talk as if nuclear energy, from what I hear now, is the worst thing that will happen to humanity. But right now, people are talking about, what's the name? Climate warming? What? Global warming, whatever it is. Yeah. I don't think coal plays a big role in diminishing that. I mean, if nuclear energy is bad, I thought nuclear coal was just as bad. But when I talk about the hypocrisy of the West, if you go to countries like France, for example, like 40% of their energy comes from nuclear power, which they take from African countries, Burkina Faso, I think Burkina Faso, a country which has less than 4% of electricity. So Russia, on the other hand, has always been on the right side of history, from helping us fight apartheid, to helping us now fighting Western hegemony. So I find it very strange when people want to talk as if the West has always had this concern about human rights and international law. That's just empty sloganeering. Russia, however, on the side has always been helpful. I mean, countries like Germany, as we speak right now, they run out of energy, which they relied on Germany for. Yeah. Right now, they're talking about putting their nuclear power stations online. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I believe there's a question from the Durban. Yeah, okay. Okay, we'll start with this question here, and then the Durban question, and then I'll hand over to the panel before we take the next round.
Thank you very much. Africa. If we only go to the country which we see there is already a process of power station, it will be also a good way to think those countries that didn't yet in that process, so that the African circle of nuclear power station can stop in advance. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaiah. Is there a question from the... Yeah.
Hello?
So, I mean, I got a message from them saying, can we...
Hello? 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 Hello, my name is Sandy Lendawande from Green Network. I hope you hear me. My
Yes.
question is very simple. Because in this issue that we're talking about, there seems to be a lot of politics and a lot of secrecy. So I wanted to ask from the people who knows better about the West and the rich countries who are using nuclear, what do they do with their waste, and what is the cost of waste management in their own countries? For example, Russia and other countries that you have mentioned, because of the secrecy that we're experiencing. I'm asking these questions because our youth is unemployed and is being also poisoned about this energy generation or generating as one of the way of job creation. So we're having that kind of challenge in South Africa. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to... Oh, are there more questions from Durban? No. Okay. I might do a quick round of responses before doing more questions. So I think maybe, Vlad, could you do like a broad response to some of the comments and questions, and then there was a specific question for Peter as well.
I spend a lot of time working here with colleagues in South Africa, and I was going to many meetings with different communities, Western Cape, Eastern Cape, Johannesburg. I've been many places. I've heard this thing about Russia is our friend because it helped to defeat apartheid many, many times. And every time I was responding one thing. I mean, guys, that's been over 30 years ago. That's been a very different country. It's been communist country. Today, it's a wild capitalist country. It's a country ruled by secret services. The country that actually launched unprovoked bloody war in Ukraine, and there are a few hundreds of thousands of people already killed in this war, and not a single person in my country actually understand why our insane president actually started it and what was the reason. So, I mean, I understand your feeling about the past, but I'm warning you, Russia is far from it being 35 years ago or more. It's a very different thing right now. Really, very, very different. You know, I'll be happy to talk to you later after discussion on that more. The question about waste, I would say there is no such thing as a final cost for treating waste. And okay, I'm gonna put you this way. Nuclear waste, I mean part of nuclear waste, well, it's high-level waste, will be dangerous for thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. There is no material that humankind designed so far to actually, you know, sustain through such a long period of time. So basically, it's practically impossible to calculate the final cost of a treating waste, because I mean, all you can do, maybe there will be some magic technology in the future, and the nuclear industry been promising this magic technology to appear very soon, since approximately 70 years ago. Every time we were asking, like, what's about waste? What's about like your new nice technology that will solve the problem? And they were saying, it's coming, we will solve the problem, don't worry. And it's been saying they are saying this 70 years, more or less. Problem is not solved. Maybe in the future it will be solved. We don't know. But for now, the only way to treat waste is to basically store waste and keep an eye on this and try to make sure that it's safe storage, that there is no leakages of radiation out of it, but there is no final solution for it, because what we call final solution is when we have a guarantee that for all time the waste will remain dangerous, there will be protection that prevent radiation exposure, that establish a barrier between waste on one side and people in environment on the other side. It's impossible to make this barrier today. There are simply no such materials that humankind's designed to build such a barrier. So we don't know how much the future generations will spend on it, but we're kind of sure that they will spend really a lot of money on this.
Sorry, just having a, do you want to go? Do you want to go? Yeah, I want to say, Vlad gave us a very interesting presentation about what radioactive waste does, in particular to women. It affects your reproductive health. It can affect the unborn child. You can have miscarriages. It's cancerous. I don't know if we all really fully understand what radioactive waste does. It's completely invisible, and this is the problem with the culture of secrecy and the spin and the misinformation around nuclear, that it's safe, reliable, and cheap. Those are all lies, and we can continue to expose these lies. And I really want us to find ways that we can trust what we find on the internet. I want to just mention Gabriel Claessens, who's at the back. He's actually standing so you can see him. He does TikTok, and he is helping people to understand about nuclear and the dangers. And that's a really accessible way of finding out more. I do think that we need to be in solidarity with other parts of Africa. When we were in Kenya, we were told, South Africa and Ghana are, going ahead with nuclear. And so there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation, and we really have to challenge that. And I absolutely appreciate people who are willing to stand up in a room of anti-nuclear activists and give the other side, because the only way we can truly understand what it is that people are thinking is if we are able to ask those difficult questions. Some people have heard that many, many times in refutable newspapers. But, also, I want to encourage people, please, to follow people like Neil Overy and others who write on this topic. They're experts, and you can follow them, look at the conversation. There's lots of places you can look online to find out more about the misinformation around nuclear. And I think it's really important for solidarity visits like we did to Kenya. It's good for us, and it's good for that community. And just since then, in the Ghanaian press, there was a picture of that trip and a conversation about what Kenyan activists are doing. If there's one thing I learned at SAFSI, it's that absolutely a small group of committed people can really make a big difference. We don't have to be the whole movement of South Africa. That's our dream, right? But we've got to actually do with what we have and do our very best. So I want to really encourage each of you, please, to feel that you are now part of this campaign and to go back to your communities and share this information that we've been sharing today. I'm going to leave the 44% increase of electricity to Peter, but obviously, it's completely unacceptable, and we as the public have an opportunity at NERSA to come and say this is unacceptable increase, and we keep tracking us at SAFSI and EarthLife, because we will be raising awareness around when that opportunity is coming.
Thank you very much. In the past 3 months, 2 months or 3 months, one of the anti-nuclear activists who actually was working at the Pelindaba nuclear facility passed on. He was one of the leaders. His name is Alfred Sipepe. And Alfred Sepepe represents many other former workers or workers at the nuclear power plants. And when Alfred passed on, we actually got very worried because this is the person who was prepared to expose what is happening within that nuclear research or medicine facility. Alfred was employed as a general worker together with many other general workers. So when they got sick, they were retrenched or they were told that they were not fit for work. So this thing that when we build nuclear reactors, we're going to create jobs. I think in our minds, we have people like Alfred Sepepe who actually became victims of this nuclear energy facilities. And when we were at Atlantis public hearings, someone also made a testimony to say they know a person who also was exposed to radioactivity, apparently, I'm not sure, or allegedly was working within the plant. So these are issues that need to be taken up. But do we have experience in that? How is radioactive materials handled in the country when the very institution that was created to handle radioactive waste doesn't have enough financial backing? So it's a question. So that means there's an inadequate handling of nuclear waste. And if you think about jobs created around that, I think people may just be getting themselves or signing death warrants themselves. France and other countries get their uranium from countries like Niger, where the people of Niger, when this idea came that there's uranium, they were saying we are blessed. They are blessed that there's this mineral that is found in their area that is going to make them rich. But lo, they now say it's a curse. And we only talk about Niger now. The comrade who just spoke from the Democratic Republic of Congo, they also mine a lot of uranium there, and that uranium was the one used for the First and the Second World War to create atomic bombs. And today, that uranium is still being mined for other countries. And because of the mining activities not regulated in other countries, so it becomes a danger for the local populations. So the historic activities of the past are still taking place. And if we don't stop any nuclear expansion or any new nuclear build, we would be complicit of murder, because we know what is happening and how people's lives are being affected by generating electricity from nuclear. So I think one thing that we also need to do is just to find a way on making connections with how our countries are being ruled, with the kind of so-called democracy that we have, because we know, I think all of us know that when the nuclear deal was struck off, when Earthlife and SAFSA challenged government over the new build or proposed new build, we know what happened. There was a change of politicians. Somebody was forced to resign because the person, it was clear that there was some hands in the cookie bar. So that, if we allow, we should know that would be ruled remotely by other countries. So this is another form of colonization that is coming through, and that we should not allow it to happen.
Thank you, Makoma. Very eloquent. Okay, Peter, for your specifically targeted question.
Thank you. And just briefly on the waste story, For me, the analogy is jumping out of an aeroplane with a sewing machine and a bolt of cloth and saying, we'll work something out on the way down. And this is the magic that's going to happen one day, and we'll deal with how to do. In fact, future generations can deal with it. We'll just enjoy the plane ride. Ultimately, the product of nuclear power is waste. The electricity is a transient thing, but the actual product is waste. What appalls me is that for the life extension of Coburg, it's such a basic, obvious, logical step that that's going to produce more waste, which means the footprint of the waste dump is going to increase as an inevitable consequence of the life extension. So why has no environmental impact assessment been done for that? And for Eskom to say, oh, well, it's somebody else who's going to dispose of it, so we don't have to do the environmental impact assessment is nonsense. Because it's inevitable consequence of the life extension is 50% more waste. So there's no-go option for those of you who are familiar with EIA stories. So I think that's a huge lack at the moment in terms of the whole plan. To come to the question that was specific to me, the costs of Coburg. Yeah, I remember that quote, nuclear is the most complicated way ever invented to boil water. And the true costs of nuclear, if you take something like Coburg, the entire department at the Department of Energy used to be DMRE with the Deputy Director General for Nuclear and his entire staff. That's a cost. That's a cost of Coburg, right? That wouldn't exist if we didn't have Coburg. If you look at something like NEXA, the Nuclear Energy Corporation of South Africa, they had to be bailed out for 850 billion in a government grant. That wouldn't exist. So those costs are not included by Eskom in the cost of Coburg. But the only reason they exist is because of the nuclear technology. Ankeluch, the standby generator and the dedicated line, that's a cost of nuclear, but that's put under transmission. So all these costs that are actually related to Coburg existing, and it has created a huge special interest group. And they are lobbying actively, saying things like nuclear is fantastic, renewables don't work, to shut down. That special interest group would lose its existence. It would lose its reason for its existence and lose the ability to justify its existence. Because now they would have to find something else to do. They say, well, we're supporting Coburg. Well, what if there's no Coburg? They'll re-skill themselves or they'll relocate themselves. So that would be the end of unknown costs. To answer your question more directly, we can of course go to nurse and object to the increase, but we can also nip those costs in the bud by preventing the expense that's going to be associated with Coburg and the entirely unknown expense that's going to be associated with disposing of the waste that results from that. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. We are technically out of time. I know there's at least one question from the room and some more on Zoom. Are people happy to stay a little bit for a few more questions? Okay, cool. Not that many questions. I know there's some there, some there, some there. Okay, I'll take the two on Zoom first. Oh, sorry, no. Actually, I'll take your question first because you had your hand up from the very beginning. And then I'll do the Zoom ones. Then there's a hand here, and a hand here, and a hand here. Okay, I'll do that. Please keep your questions brief, and yeah, keep your questions brief. Thank you. Can somebody take a microphone to?
If anyone wants to ask more questions, we can stay around and network after that. So we're not over time.
Yeah, don't repeat questions that have been asked before as well. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone in the room. I'm Marion Bukers from the Northern Cape, Springbok, from the Church, the Throne of God, the Throne of David. It's more of a comment and a very important one at that. I'm going to start with the two scientific facts. I'm not going to explain all my knowledge here because we know all the stuff, but there are important facts here, two that I want to mention. David Fick. I was in the HPS offices here in Church Street, and I came across the book that David Fick wrote. It's called The Uranium Road. There's a fact in that book that nuclear cannot be decomposed after at least 144 years. So if that is the fact, then the conclusion that I make that I've seen in my lifetime that there are 5 generations living in 100 years. So if it's going to take 144,000 years for nuclear to decompose, it's going to cost us 10,000 generations of people. It is not just money that it's going to cost our lives. And then there's another book, it's called the Enviropedia. I saw in the Enviropedia that 5 kgs of plutonium can kill the 50 billion humanity on Earth. 5 kgs. While since 1986 until now in Namakwa, in Walpits, where I live, there have been stored 1,000 kgs of plutonium, which means that the Namakwa people's lives have been endangered 200 times. That is only 1,000 kgs, low-level waste. So what about the high-level waste? Let's not go any further on the scientific facts. Let's look at the government. This is not cost effective.
Sorry, can you just keep it brief, please?
This is not time effective. This is not effective in any way. So I don't know what they are heading at. It's like a huge antichrist attempt to destroy God's creation. Because nuclear destroys the earth and everything they're in and everything they're on. So government is not going to cut it for us. We can't go to the government because it is their nuclear plan. Why don't we, my question to SAFSI and Earthlife, I am from Namakwa and I can explain to you that there have been 3 applications. Let me name just 3. One in the coast from Honokla Bay to Alexander Bay. They want to take out our scaly gas. And in, I think it's in the Graafrenet region, uranium, and in the Kimberley region, plutonium. That is in the Northern Cape. They want those 3 components. Heaven knows, good knows what's going to happen if they're going to proceed.
Sorry, please keep it.
So my question is, why don't we empower a universal overseer? Because government is not going to do it for us. We're going to need a level of jurisdiction that is higher than that of any government, church or state. So why don't we empower an already existing universal overseer to stop the government? Because this universal overseer did already in Namakwa stop the Orion Mine Company. They want to come and take out our copper. So the universal overseer did put a warning in their way with the human rights and the biblical consent of the 10 commandments to stop them. So why don't we empower that universal overseer?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. We can also discuss more later. I'm going to take the online questions quickly. Please keep your questions brief. The online questions.
Good evening, everyone. Desmond Desai here in Durban. My question is very simple. How do we strengthen this campaign? Is there a roadmap? And will that information be shared so we know exactly, is there a campaign against ESCOM? Is there a campaign against government? Is there a parliamentary process? Can all that information be shared? Because then we can mobilize in Durban. If that is possible, I know Francisca and I are talking with Brian. Yeah, I think we need to get to the action. Thank you.
There was another.
We've already.
I see everybody's hands.
Asked
Don't
the
worry.
question.
Okay.
It's been covered.
You, then Renee, and then.
Let me make 3 short points. One, there's actually mainstream media that covers the development of nuclear facilities and gives a critical perspective on it. It's very interesting that The Economist magazine some years ago covered the modular nuclear reactor and said that this is completely unproven. It is going to be extremely costly and it's very experimental. And yet, the mainstream media, and especially government side, push this thing as if everything had been solved already. But for those that read, we can actually find very critical perspectives on this issue everywhere. Secondly, I want to ask our guests from Russia, what is the response of the communities that are affected directly to this development? In South Africa, when you look at this group of people, it has grown over the last 40 years to become a quite very powerful activist group, but yet we leave out our communities too much. The people that experience the stuff and has to bear the brunt of the exposure, they must be empowered, because we are dealing with the development of our civil society, not just with the technical issue. So when people then say, but we don't listen to the Europeans or whoever, that kind of argument doesn't make sense for me. Because you must ask, what is the impact on the local communities that are affected by these things? And you will see it directly. And there will be no arguments anymore on this kind of thing. It's not ideological in the first place. It's a question about human life and the sustenance of human life. Lastly, when the budget of a country is skewed to the extent that 1 trillion rand is pledged for a nuclear build, you can know that we are in for an authoritarian future. Because that is extremely undemocratic. It turns the direction and the output and the objectives of society into a direction that will only benefit a very small, powerful group. Our country has a fragile democracy. We have an elite government in this country. And if we don't break down these powerful people and this in-group, this oligarchy, we will fail our people in general. So what I'm arguing for is that we as activists, we truly need to reach out to our communities and do the necessary mobilization that's necessary and invest the time and the energy that we need to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, and thank you to our panelists. My name is Renai Haruna, and I am a resident from Atlantis, which is very closely impacted with this, and very dear to my heart concern, this issue on the nuclear. My question to the panel is, as a resident, as a concerned citizen, what is at our disposal, what we can do immediately to alleviate, because Atlantis is not, I think, Ankerlig, Eskom and Koeberg nuclear station is very near to us. So most of the employers there are actually from Atlantis, which has a huge impact on our health. What can we as residents do currently, right now? What is there that we can do? Because I think once we, like the gentleman just now said, we need to empower our communities. But if we don't have a solution, if we can't tell them this is what we can do, then we won't be able to mobilize because Atlantis is very fragile and they are a hopeless community because everybody has failed us on so many levels, especially when they say there's jobs. But how can the jobs also lead to a lot of deaths as well? So there's no balance. So that's my question. What can we as residents do right now?
Thank you. Thank you, Renee. Good question.
Hello, thank you. Just a quick question to Peter about the position of a community rep on the board. What's happening about that?
Also brief, somebody rightly mentioned about jobs, maybe there are lots of jobs in building nuclear. If we took 200 billion, 400 billion and spent that on small scale renewable energy rolling out, wind and solar across our countryside, we could employ hundreds of thousands of people. We wouldn't need a grid, an expensive grid, and we would bring energy to our people in this country. Small scale renewable energy.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to wrap it there with the questions and ask the panelists to respond. If we can also keep the responses relatively brief. Vlad, you had your hand
and I will start with a comment on the last comment. It's true that renewable energy brings a lot more jobs than nuclear, and in case of a small reactors, I believe the number of jobs is even lower than in case of a big power plant, because in case of a big power plant, there would be, well, more people involved with different services, and with small plants, it's not that many involved. And a very important difference is when it comes to who get the job. Because in case of a nuclear power plant, you would need trained nuclear professionals to work in there. But in case of renewable energy, I mean, it doesn't have to be trained nuclear professionals, and it's relatively easy to organize a training for local communities so people can actually work, you know, in renewable energy industry, especially if there would be, you know, renewable power plant next to a community village or township. So it's important to understand that, you know, like renewable energy industry provides jobs for communities. It's possible, but nuclear power plant is not. And I wanted to respond to an earlier question about Russia and how communities affected and what they say. Well, unfortunately, we don't have democracy anymore. We have a dictatorship, and it's a great privilege that you have democracy here. Because, I mean, we used to have democracy back in 90s. Our President Putin, who is now a dictator in Russia and who's going to stay in power probably until he dies. So when he came to power, that was in the year of 2000, he became a president. And since the year 2000, he is a president almost all the time. So in 90s, before Putin, in like early 21st century, we did have democracy, and the communities were speaking strongly against nuclear installations, whether it's nuclear reactors or nuclear waste facilities. People would strongly be opposed to it, and back in 90s it worked. I mean that people, if they effectively organized, they were capable of stopping those things. But now, well, I would say about last 20 years, we had less and less and less democracy. Now we don't have any democracy. We have dictatorship. And I also want to, maybe to say one more thing to the guy who was asking earlier and said that Russia is our friend and everything. No, I'm really proud of my country that like long time ago, they were helping to fight apartheid. And it's a great thing. But, I mean, right now, if I would be speaking all that I was telling you today here, if I would be in Russia and I would be speaking at the panel like this today, like exactly the same thing, I would likely go to jail because I'm criticizing government. It's not allowed to criticize government anyway in Russia today. So for Russian communities today, the choice is, well, you remain silent, or you try to, criticize something and then you go to jail. And it's like, it's not about maybe, it's about you certainly go to jail. That's unfortunate, that's how things are in Russia. And I mean, like, it's really great that in other countries people still have democracy and still can stop those bad things that we call nuclear. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Just very briefly, what can Atlantis do? What can all of us do? Well, the DA is now part of the Government of National Unity. Ask your local ward councillor, what's the evacuation plan? Do they even know if there is one? They probably don't, because they know probably less than you do at this point. Ask your elected officials. They need to be able to keep asking the questions. What's the safety plan? How will we know if there's a problem at Coburg? Keep asking the questions. These are very important things, and it's your right to know it. And as Vlad has pointed out to us, we do live in a democracy, and we need to be raising this with elected officials, empowering them to ask the difficult questions. Let's ask the city of Cape Town, what are they going to do? The population has increased manyfold since this nuclear power station was built. If it was being built now, it wouldn't be allowed to be where it stands. It wouldn't be allowed to be where it stands because there's too many people living near Koeberg. So it's very, very important that we say, why do we have to put up with this? There's too many of us living here. We can't evacuate safely. Also, tomorrow we're coming to Atlantis, so we can continue the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for bringing up the media frenzy around small modular reactors. But I think if anyone speaks positive of the small modular reactors, it's an injustice because they're not worth even the paper that information is written on. From Comrade Des in Durban and the comrade here who asked what we can do or what, I think we need to continue mobilizing and organizing in our own local communities, talking to people, sharing information, whatever you have. We start mobilizing from each and every corner of the country and beyond, and talk to as many people as you can, whether local or in other countries. In that way, we're starting to build awareness, share information, TikTok videos. I know people are always on TikTok, and that is what also passes the message very quickly. What we have at our disposal is the power to organize, is the power to congregate, is the power to share information in a language and also in a manner that is accessible to all of us. But the other tools that we have, it's also to support the call for the decommissioning of Koeberg power plant. And this is what Koeberg Alert Alliance is leading at the moment. And we should be part of supporting and ensuring that we don't create waste that would last for centuries and centuries, that would demand or that would make the great-grandchildren or the coming generations swear at our graves. The other thing is that we need to advocate for renewable energy technologies. They are working, they're not battery economy, and we have seen, as long as you find shopping centers, you find mining companies installing solar panels on their rooftops, it tells you it works. And what we need to do is to call for a greater investment in renewable energy technologies, but that would create jobs for people so that we can create cooperatives and have what you call socially owned renewable energy, and demand the grid to be liberalized so that we can have renewable energy fit in tariffs, the electricity that we don't use as cooperatives to be fed into the grid, and we get paid as other people are using that. Thank you.
I sense a certain feeling of urgency from the questions. What can you do? What can you do now, right? So right now the decision is out to grant this conditional approval for the life extension. You can appeal to the minister. You can do that now. Which minister? Probably both of them. And how to do it? Well, I think all organizations here are offering support. At Koeberg Alert, there's a Twitter handle, there's a Facebook page. Reach out, and we've done cooperative workshops with people, how to phrase that properly. Within the next 60 days, less, hopefully, don't wait for the deadline. Send an appeal to the minister. Basically, it's the same issues as your submission. And that leads into the evacuation plan. The NNR had 14 non-compliances last time they did it, and they've kept it secret, that report. They won't release it, despite attempts to pilot that thing. How can they keep that from you? So they aren't able to evacuate you, and being able to evacuate you is a condition of the license. So why are they still operating, right? Appeal to the minister, you can do that right now.
Done that. Jobs, yeah, jobs is quite interesting. Won't we lose jobs if we decommission Coburg? No, we'll create jobs. Firstly in renewable energy, but also who's going to deconstruct that plant and knock it down and carry all the rubble away? It'll create a huge amount of jobs if we decommission Coburg. And doing this, why have I got this note? Somebody must have asked. Giving them the long-term operation is basically writing a blank check. Because they say you've got approval, but you have to do all these things in order to do it. So whatever it costs, they're just going to keep doing it, right? It's a blank check to them. Community rep, what do we do about that? What can you do? These two questions link to each other. There's no community rep. The CEO went to Parliament and asked that they remove from the law the requirement for a community rep. Yeah. Yeah, so because it's a pain having oversight and somebody asking too many questions like I was accused of doing. So we need to find someone. I think my window has passed. We need to find someone else to take that role. We need to, I want to transfer my experience and my knowledge to such a person. We need to find someone to nominate, to put forward into that role, put pressure on the minister saying, why is that role vacant? The law requires it. Here's our nomination. Nominations need to go in for your community rep. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much to all the panelists and the various calls to action that we have here. Appeal, mobilize in your communities, talk to your local councillors, attend parliamentary meetings, and don't forget to use the TikToks. Yeah, thank you once again to all of our panelists and to all of you as well for being here and for being interested and for your interesting questions. Yeah, let's give the panel another round of applause. And I'm going to hand over to Mati.
Thanks, everyone. I think what I'm taking away today is the health aspect on women. I think that's a big conversation that we should be talking more about. Also that we need more young people to come onto these conversations. Respect to you all, but I'd love to see Gen Zs in this room next time. As the conversations we had yesterday, creating more content and out on TikTok. Please do check out our new podcast that was launched last week. There is a conversation there with Francesca and Makoma. We're also talking, and myself as the host. But yeah, if you need the link, please go onto social medias on SEFC, and there is the link there. And also we have light refreshments outside as you go out. Thank you so much. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks for coming. Thank you.